Hello and happy Thursday. It's me and Dr. K back with another episode all about relationships. And today we're talking about everybody's favorite, toxicity. At least
Is
I think
that
that's what we're talking about.
it is? We might have a sequel.
Yeah.
Is everybody's favorite toxic relationships?
Well, and it's like it's twofold because I think that it's really not any relationship that's toxic, but it's sometimes the combination of two people's energy creates toxicity. So I don't think it's right to ever say like, well, that person's toxic. Well, you had a hand in creating whatever that was, and
Friction.
sometimes it could be friction. I love the word friction for things like that because it really is. It always takes two for that loving relationship, for that toxic relationship. It's the friction between the people that creates it. And if you can get that really, then it's like, well, can you navigate it without creating the friction? Is it something you have to walk away from? Every situation is unique, but that's kind of what we're talking about. But we will be hopping off by 10:20 because I have to take my son to an appointment. So we will be what? I'm getting some weird error message. Oh, I apparently was trying to stream to Twitter and they require you to pay for that now, which I wasn't even trying to do. So we'll just remove that. I was trying to do Twitch, not Twitter, so I'll just add that. Okay. But anyway, toxicity. My relationship with Twitter apparently is pretty toxic right now.
That can happen in an instant. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're conflicting relationships. They don't even necessarily have to be toxic. Conflicting relationships in the workplace, at home, in family, between spouses, between friends, between cousins, etc.
Yeah.
Who do you have conflict with?
Yeah, and let's just be clear too. You could have a completely loving, healthy relationship and still have moments of toxicity. So, like, there's a big gradient. Like, if 90% of your time in the relationship is dealing with toxicity and friction, then that might be something to evaluate. But if you have a loving relationship that occasionally has a flare, it's all just, you know, case by case. But where would we like? And feel free if you have questions, comments, some specific things you want us to speak to, please let us know.
Yeah, if anybody has questions, we're definitely here to help. So quiet time today, but there will always be some variance of conflict because as humans, we often want the other person to see it the way we see it, or the other person is more infringing and wants you to see it the way they see it. Sometimes it's not us, sometimes it is us, sometimes it's both of us, sometimes it's less of one of us. Uh, However, we are always wrapped, not always, those of us that learn more observation and groundedness have an easier time. However, most people are not in that space. And that's why we really help you all get aware and back in your own lane because everybody likes to be in everybody else's lanes, right?
Right.
Oh, she did this, he did that. Can't believe she said that. Can't believe they did that to me. Can't believe they did that to them. People, hashtag humans.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like, really toxicity, like just thinking it through, is when people are playing a dictum. Have you ever heard that term before?
Mm-mm.
They've been a dick and now they're being a victim to their own action, a dictum.
Oh,
But I'm sure that's not all the cases, but like how many of us like create our own circumstances and then are looking to project that blame to other people. So it's really like when there is something that you need to take accountability for that you don't want to take accountability for, recognize your part in it, that's just projected out. And then that creates, of course, that thing you're sending out your own energy of you have an energy around it, but I'm not willing to look at it. I'll project it on this person. And they're like, hey, that's not mine. And they might have their own thing that they're guilty of that they're projecting onto you. And then it creates this term that I coined, which is just, oh, shadow projection echo resonance. So you're both projecting your shadow on each other, and then it's resonating off each other. And the next thing you know, you went woof, and you're in a complete flare of some sort of toxic behavior, argument, uh, unloving communication. There's a lot of different things that you can label it, but a lot of it is just projecting and receiving each other through our filters and not really receiving the other person as they intended.
yes.
And a big tool for that is raw data. What's the raw data of the situation, and start to unpile all the stuff that gets added on by our own filters.
There's a lot of stuff that happens in between. So I don't, you guys know me as a functional medicine doctor, maybe surgeon, but I started with a degree in psychology. So this has been a long time coming. And there is this term that we use in psychology of projection. So when somebody has something inside that they're not processing, not looking at, maybe often they don't like, they will project that on somebody else. So if they're telling you you're a jerk, you're a liar, somewhere inside that person is likely those things. Now, don't get carried away with this because you were like, oh, yeah, so they're a liar. That's so every single something says somebody says something to me, then that is all them. I'm innocent. You have your own stuff, so be aware of
Yeah.
what you're projecting. But if an emotion is not processed, or a situation or trauma is not processed, and it's not acknowledged, and you don't like that about yourself, you will project that on somebody else. You will call the other person out on these things if you haven't done the work around all this. So better to just not judge. However, we all often get into the need to be right. So that's the other thing. We all have to be right. We have to have it our way. Versus like what Dr. Dyer mentions is have a mind that's open to everything, that you are able to listen to everything and say, oh, okay, that's interesting. But the problem becomes is one person projects, the other person projects, and yes, boom, it just blows up.
Yeah.
Or yeah, if you've had trauma, then you start taking it in and you start checking out and you start doing all these different things and turning weird and turning into a victim. So it's really all about self-mastery. If people can master themselves, we wouldn't have any of these things. We would have
Yeah.
problems.
And we always like talk like this gets a little bit woo, but if you really think that you are the only one in the room, all creation is within you. Both person in the relationship, or the creationship, as I like to call them, when you're having a conscious relationship, recognizing that that other person is you and you're them, that's a creationship because you're acknowledging the you and them and vice versa. If you're recognizing yourself as separate, that's relationship because you have this illusion of separation. But anyway, consider that 100% of everything is your fault, that and both people have to do this. It's not just that, hey, I'm going to go from my perspective that everything needs to change is on my side. Both people do that. And because you're, in a sense, you're both islands of consciousness, and your impacts have ways of impact, but at the end of the day, like, you are responsible for everything that happens on your island. And the question then becomes is, what can I change within myself? What do I need to shift, change, take accountability for, to make the reflection in the mirror smile back? Because it will never smile back until you do. So it's really the buck stops here. But the other person does the same, because we are in this crazy illusion of duality. So we are separate. The greatest truths are paradoxes. We're one, we're separate, both are true. But if you can really like recognize that I am my own sovereign island and I got to do all the work and it's all my fault, quote unquote, like from the standpoint of personal responsibility, that, and both people do that, that's where you can really have all the walls fall down and actually start to see one another.
Hmm. For sure. If you do more work on yourself, you will attract less toxic people. When your vibration gets high enough at a certain level, it's like riding in a plane. Those people down there are not going to make it up because we are like magnets, and like attracts like. So the more chaos, we talked about this, I think, in previous episodes, the more chaos you have inside, the more turmoil you have inside, the universe will be trying to help you and show you and attract those people to you that are pushing your buttons, so that you start like, hey, this person's mirroring a portion of you, not all of you. You're a wonderful person, but maybe inside you are a little angry because of something. People will come that will be angry in a certain way to trigger you, say, hey, work on that anger, release that. And when you start to shift vibrations and you become a different person, those people will kind of fall away. I've had it happen to
Yep,
me. So
yep.
they don't come in.
Sometimes, yeah, and sometimes like you're the first thing that really needs to change is action, because actions speak louder than words. And you might think one thing, and this is something I had to learn in rehab, you act opposite. Or like if Anya and I have had a little tiff or something like that, neither of us wants to hug each other, but she comes and hugs me anyway, or whatever the case is, she acts opposite of what she wants to do or what she feels, because you know that that action is going to speak so much, and then hearts melt. Like when you can actually take an action opposite of what you think. Because like Bashar talks about, who's a channeler that both Dr. K and I follow, all of the things served up in life are inherently neutral, and you get to add the polarity to it. And if you are in a negative space and you're constantly being negative, what needs to start changing is acting opposite to act positive. What would a positive person do? I'm going to act that way. And that starts to build up be able to shift you out of that space of negativity. But you got to start somewhere. And you can start in the mental thing, but mental part is really, the combination is unique for everyone. You kind of attack it, work with it from all directions: mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. But recognize that sometimes the action itself, taking that action first, can start to shift everything.
For sure, actions do a lot. And when you can come from even a sliver of love to change things. And
Ooh.
when Hank talks about everything's neutral. So a bag of sugar is just sitting there. It is just a bag of sugar. Yet we in society say sugar's horrible. Don't eat sugar. You are putting that energy on the sugar. It is taking that energy in, and therefore when you eat it, you have some sort of reaction. But sugar is just sugar. A tree is just a tree. A person is just a person standing there. I tell clients to start seeing people as people, just a human in front of you. And we were all born of a wonderful space. Over time, we get a little screwy sometimes, or very screwy, or very far off the path. But that essence in us is still good. So find the sliver of just, even if you can just say, this human came from a divine center. That human did not come from the devil or some evil energy. God, source energy, or whatever you want to identify with, is the originator of everything. It is the originator of the evil too. So everything has come from that beautiful source. And if you can start there, and even if you really dislike a person, just remember where they came from. Remember where you came from.
Mm,
You all came from the original good piece, and see that sliver. Maybe they do something that is good, but if anything, just start there. And if you can say,
mm,
okay, maybe once this person was a baby, think of them as a baby. They weren't this crappy person as a baby. They were
yep.
good as a baby. They didn't know all this stuff. Over time, they've accumulated a bunch of junk, and now they're a mess or whatever.
Mm.
You can start there and emit a little bit of love. Everything starts to change.
Yeah, and the baby analogy is great because Neil Donald Walsh, one of my favorite authors, he would say that if you have a baby and they knock over a glass of milk, like, you might be annoyed that you have to clean up milk or anything, but you're not yelling at the baby, "Why'd you do this?" They're a baby, and in a lot of ways, we are babies in consciousness. We're
Mhm.
just now really awakening as a species. That's why Neil wrote his fourth book of the trilogy that became a fourth trilogy, whatever you would call that, but it's called Awaken the Species, and it's all about humanity stepping up and stepping into what we can become as a species. But we're really babies with it. We're just now kind of awakening, becoming the Buddhas and the Christs and things like that, and starting to have these huge shifts in consciousness. And that's why we have so much turmoil, because there's a lot of this shifting out of this old way of being into the new way of being. And there's a lot of friction and toxicity that's coming up as we're writing our relationship with ourselves, not just as an individual, but as a collective.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's why everything's a
Yep.
little nuttier than usual.
Yep.
People
And
are a
good
little
morning.
crazier than usual, but we're still of the essence. So if
Good
you take
morning. Just there's someone for saying good morning. So it's my cousin, actually. So I
oh,
wanted to, and happy belated birthday. I was late wishing her happy birthday. So,
thanks.
sorry.
Yeah, if you get anything out of today and the short time that we have today, start seeing people simply as a human being. Picture them as a baby, if anything. I wonder what they look like as a baby. If you could even get that thought in your mind, that already shifts the
Mhm.
energy of seeing somebody. It takes you back to a time where they didn't have all this stuff. Now, with that said, there's a whole spectrum. We're not saying go hang out with, force yourself to hug people that
Ooh.
physically abuse you. Remember, I think that's what we're going to go on today, because there's so many different spectrums, and we may have to do a part two on this, because it's
Well, for
shorter.
sure.
But we're not, Hank and I are not saying force yourself to go hug and love on a person that's physically abusing you. You're going to have to do that from a distance, and obviously be safe and move on from there if that's the case, because sometimes people I say, we're all on shore, but we all take little boats and then we can drift so far from shore that we really don't remember. And it's going to take professional help for somebody to get back if they're extremely toxic to themselves or others, meaning physical abuse, severe emotional abuse. That if you're in a weakened state, we're not recommending to go hang out. If you're in a physical abusive relationship and we're not saying, oh, stay there and hug them every day and everything's going to change. You're going to have to send them love and do a lot of forgiveness. But if if your emotions are at risk, if your physical body's at risk, please take the measures that you need
Mm-hmm.
to move on from that and do healing and send that person love from a place of space versus sitting in that space that's just abusive. We're not saying to stay, obviously.
Oh yeah, and if you're in that level of severity of a toxic relationship, then the other question to start really asking is, what in me believes I deserve this? Where do I have such low self-worth that I feel that this is the way that I need to receive love? And start there, because even leaving, how many people have gone from one toxic abusive relationship to another, to another, to another, because they haven't healed from within, or they've only been modeled one way to look at relationships. Perhaps you grew up in a toxic relationship, and the way that people express love is through hitting each other. And it could be a fundamental belief that, even though consciously, like the conscious part of the iceberg, the part that you can see, says, I want a loving, caring, non-abusive relationship. The unconscious part of the iceberg is out manifesting the little part that you can see and creating the same things over and over. So, like, what does it take to bring the unconscious conscious? And if you are in that, what are you getting out of it? What are the things within you that really need to shift so you can have a whole different experience around love?
So important, because I know a handful of people in that position right now. They keep going back to the same toxic relationship, attracting the same person, staying. That's an indicator to you to maybe stop getting in relationships for a little while and do a lot of internal self work. And at the
Ooh.
same time, not focusing on all I do is attract toxic relationships. Delete that and create that statement and say, okay, what within me do I need to shift and change to attract much more exciting and loving relationships? But it's true. We do start believing that we keep going back maybe to the same person. I've seen people go back to, I think I've even done that to some small
Yeah.
degree, going back to the same, you break up with the person, then you go back to the person, you break up with the person, you go back to the person, you go
Hmm.
living with them again. And it never heals. But somewhere inside you think, no, if I keep persisting, things are going to change and they're going to get better. They don't, because I learned that once I started turning inward and saying, oh no, this is within me. I have to learn the lesson of self-love, which was 17, 16 years. I obviously, it wasn't physical or anything like that, but it wasn't what I needed. And then once I did that, I tell you, everything changes versus continuously going to the external and trying to fix it there. That doesn't work.
And the other thing that's coming to me to add, in terms of toxicity specifically, is toxicity and friction occurs when one person, whether consciously or unconsciously, is creating an environment where the other person has to stifle their authenticity or stifle who they are as a person. And they talk about this in one of the Access books, which I really appreciate, from Dr. Dane here, Being You, Changing the World. We look to sacrifice who we are to fit into a container of a relationship. So,
Oh
like,
yeah.
literally, Dr. K pulls up with her two-car convertible thing, and I'm sitting here with all my baggage. Well, I got to sacrifice this. I got to cut off my leg. I got to do all this stuff in order to fit into this box. And now, like, I'm miserable. And so it's like, well, what if the relationship could be one of empowerment, of I am empowering Dr. K to be her authentic self, and without sacrificing who I am. Like, without sacrificing who you are, how can you empower the other person to be who they are? And those are the relationships that really start to thrive. But how much toxicity is really me not being true to myself, or having the perception because of someone else I can't be true? And yeah, it is.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that I see so much. I've gone through it myself. Gosh, what did I do when I was in that long relationship?
Yeah.
I painted my nails. He's like, why don't you wear clothes like her? Why don't? And so of course, what do I do? Start doing that. But how many people are not living their authentic life just so that they can get love?
Yeah.
Like, okay, my husband said I can't have a dog and I can't work the job I want. I have to stay. And then you shrink, your whole field shrinks.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough one because sometimes those relationships are not necessarily really bad relationships, but the conversation really has to be had then. Why are you not allowing me to be me? Why are you not trusting me enough to do the job that I want to do? Or if I want to wear funky clothes, you're not putting me down. Or, if your spouse or significant other, whoever you're with, is putting you down for wanting to be who you are and not encouraging that and saying, or steering, like if you're out of the loop, obviously I'm not go walk around naked. You can't do that. We have societal parameters, but allowing you to be an artist or be who you want to be without
Yeah.
somebody in your relationship or your husband or wife telling you, you're never going to make it. I'm not going to let you do that. I'm not
Hmm.
going to pay for that. I'm not going to help you with that. I'm not going to support you if you do that. That is the worst thing you can say to somebody in this
And we
lifetime.
start getting programmed with that way before we get
Oof,
to
yeah.
relationships, because how many people have a dream and like you tell your parents about it, and then they say, well, that's a nice hobby and all, but you have to go out and get a real job. And like you are already taught, don't aim so high because you don't want to be disappointed if you don't get it. Like we're already taught to settle for less, settle for less, settle for less. And then we're taught that the thing that you do is you graduate, then you go to college, then you get married, then you have kids, and you have the house, and then you have an acceptable life that everybody can get behind. But what if that doesn't work for you? But we've only been taught one way to be in the world. Here is the life path, and it involves wife. Well, no, it's college, job, wife, kids, retirement, regret. Because I get here and I didn't live the life that I
True.
really wanted to live. I wanted to be a Mexican fisherman, or like, I'm alluding to the rat race story from Param there, but the whole thing is like, who and what did the soul really come to be? And at some point, most of us around 28, we realize, wow, who am I really? And we go through this like a whole awakening thing, which is really painful. But what would it take in whatever relationships we're in to realize, like for me and Anya, like we realize we are each other's life witness. We are there to empower each other. Whatever she wants to do, I don't hold her back. You want to be an artist, great. You want to do X, Y, or Z, I am full support of that. And she's been fully supportive of me and all my crazy, weird shamanic things, and we have learned to be that for each other. And sometimes it's hard because like you want to spend more time with that person, but they're off photographing trees and things like that, whatever the case is. And that's definitely not my thing. I'd rather do other things. And so like learning to celebrate that individually and not feel like you're losing the person, because I think that's the other thing to it is we are so afraid of being alone. And we skip from relationship to relationship. Oh, I broke up with so and so. I've already had another boyfriend lined up before I even broke up with that boyfriend. So I'm not alone. And I moved from one place to the other. I've never been alone, and fortunately for me, Anya will go to Germany for 2 months, and like I have this me, myself, and my soul time, and it's
Yeah.
so important to
That
have
is so important
that alone time.
to learn to be alone. These are such golden nuggets. Oh, if you're with somebody that does not support you, this is really challenging. But I think I never wish on anybody to be in. You have to ask yourself maybe this question on your deathbed. If you didn't do or try to do all the things that you wanted to do because somebody, specifically the relationship you're in, severely prevented you from doing that, I really have to question why you stayed in that relationship. And I know that's a little harsh, but personally, I am such a bold spirit that I do not like to be told you can't do that. So if you have a husband or a wife or somebody that continuously
Or a
tells
friend.
you, or a friend that,
Yeah.
this is for any relationship. Don't do, you're never going to be successful at that. You suck. I'm not going to if you do that, I'll divorce you. I really have to ask for you to question because that shrinks your field. It shrinks you so
Yep.
much. It doesn't feel good. Or this thing like you really want a dog because you love dogs, but your husband is like, no effing way. We're not getting a dog. How does that feel? That is not
Uh-oh.
somebody that loves you.
Don't say that too loud. Anya wants a cat, I think, and I'm like totally, but more than because like they go to Germany. Like I don't want to. Anyway, that's a topic
That's a
for another
different,
day. If
but I
she
mean, like,
really wanted one, that's weird. No,
but it's
definitely
a
not.
shrinking feeling. Try to work. If that
Yeah.
person can at least work it out. Okay, let's see, maybe right this second is not a good time. Maybe we can volunteer somewhere. Maybe we can, but if the person flat out slams you down, I think is what I'm saying,
Yeah,
like
without being heard.
not being
And
heard, slams you down, doesn't work. Like, okay, well, you want a dog, but how are we going to work that out? We're both working. Doesn't even entertain the idea, or and that's just a silly example, but a deeper example of you're forget it. You're never going to be a good artist. You're never going to be a fisherman. You're never slams you down and makes you feel horrible, and you don't feel good in that relationship. You really have to question why you're staying.
and
Yeah,
here's the other thing, it's not just people, it's organizations, it's
yeah,
your
everything.
career itself, it's religions. Like how many religions say you can't have you like you have to have very little because other people deserve it more. Or Ryan Dean once said, what, because he, like, we're all self-employed, and we were talking about like regular jobs and things like that, and he's like, well, you have to ask yourself the question, how much am I willing to be paid for an hour of my life to work for somebody else's dreams? And it's like, whoa, like when you think of it in that context, and like if you love what you do, like a copywriter or anything like that, that's one thing, you're feeding your soul's passion. But if you're going to a job you hate in order to earn money to then do the things that you love, like you are trading an hour of your life for what? And it's like, well, how can you start to shift? Can you bring the passion into the work then? Because something needs to shift, because that job is then creating atrophy. Or if you have a religion that is in conflict with your core belief, that thing could cause atrophy. And so, like, where are the places where it's taking away from your life? Can you shift that and create an upward spiral of growth and authenticity and things? Or is it something that cannot be shifted and you have to consider letting go of?
These are just golden nuggets, and I know we're inching on time, so we've got
I
about
know, 2
2 minutes. So
minutes,
has
and then I will
questions,
be driving in the car, and yeah, hope I
but
know where
we
my car
pulled
keys
out
are.
some good info. These are
Yeah,
really important pieces. If you're being squashed, question why you're there. You don't
yeah.
have to stay. You don't. We're not advocating anything, but reevaluate then what the surrounding pieces. If you are, yeah, I think,
Well, and if you can create sufficient change, I believe that any relationship, anything, you can create positivity and growth and things for you. But what is the amount of effort that needs to go into it? And then you have to consider opportunity cost. Because I might be able to take this one thing and turn it around. Like I know there's this one relationship in my life, or not in my life anymore, that it could create a lot of fruits and growth for the soul, but at what cost? And at that point, it's just like, well, it simply is not worth the bandwidth, the continuous bandwidth, and the ripple effect of other things in my life to pursue that. And it is a hard thing because you can legitimately care and love somebody, but at what cost? And is it worth it? And
yeah.
that's a personal choice, because anything I believe can have fruits. But how much is that fruit going to cost you? You could go down and get the fruit cheaper at the next vendor down, and
Yeah, that's a total flip point. That's good. I'm not saying get out. Everything can be repaired. It has to take two people that want to repair it. So that's the other thing. Like if you're on the verge, but both of you say, well, if this is possible to repair, we're willing to do the work because we've strayed off a little too far, and that
yeah,
happens. But again, yes, what is the bandwidth? What's it going to cost? Is it going to cost you emotionally so heavily that it's going to deplete you? You have to look at all angles of it. Write them down. Write things down sometimes and really, or go through it in your head, because that will be important.
yeah.
But lots of golden nuggets here
Yep,
today.
and we have somebody saying they're probably going to watch the stream a few times to absorb all the wisdom, and that was a good one from Ryan Dean, sensitive topic for many. And from Magic Mike, Kaneki Kawaiki, highest blessings to you all. If you're watching this on a replay and you had a thing that was inspiring to you that you want to share, shoot us a message. If you have topics you want us to talk about, let us know. We are happy. We thrive when people interact with us and we can gear the conversation to where you want to go.
Yeah.
So, like, what would you like to hear from us? But if you can't tell, we've shifted our entire streams all about relationships. So that's the nitty gritty, because anything we can talk about as it applies to relationships. So everything's going to have that theme. If you haven't noticed, that's our new jam. So let us know how we
It's
can be of
just
service to you.
where we've been led. So
Yeah. Yeah. And Anna says, thank you for the reminders. Well, like 90% of my clients that come to me are like women going through relationship transitions and things like that. And Dr. K has the same thing, but with guys. So
yep.
apparently, like, both of us are like there. Yeah, and well, we're gonna get even more and more controversial and inspiring, we'll say.
I like that.
As we move through some of the things that we're planning on sharing, we've had some thought into it. We're going to be, challenging some of the paradigms and things that we have been taught in our society, and like, where could we really go? What could relationships look like? It's kind of exciting. But I gotta go. Gotta go
Okay.
drive to Lakewood for a doctor's appointment. But we'll see you all next time, guys. Love you all, and let us know how we can be of service as I look for my little
Bye.
video. Bye.